In 1945, an Egyptian farmer accidentally shattered a clay jar buried in the desert near Nag Hammadi and unleashed the most dangerous spiritual knowledge the ancient world had ever tried to destroy. Inside were 13 leather-bound codices containing texts so threatening to the established order that entire institutions had spent 2 millennia ensuring no living person would ever read them. These were the Gnostic scriptures, the hidden maps of reality written by those who claimed to see through the illusion that controls human consciousness. They described a planetary prison, invisible rulers called art, and a sleeping humanity unknowingly feeding a system designed to keep the divine spark locked inside every soul permanently dormant. But buried within these texts was something even more extraordinary. A precise description of a moment in human history when the veil would thin, the frequencies would shift, and mass awakening would become not just possible, but inevitable. That moment, according to the Gnostic seers who wrote these words in the 2nd century, is not coming. It is already here. What you're about to hear will permanently change the way you understand everything happening in the world right now. The discovery that terrified the world. In December of 1945, near the cliffs of Jabal ul-Taref in Upper Egypt, a young farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Samin was digging for fertilizer when his mattock struck something hard beneath the surface. What he unearthed that afternoon was not soil. It was a sealed red earthenware jar nearly a meter tall, and for a brief moment he hesitated to break it open. Local legend warned that jars like this sometimes contain jinn, spirits capable of possession and destruction. But greed overcame superstition, and when the jar shattered, golden pages scattered across the desert sand. He had no idea he had just recovered the most suppressed spiritual library in human history. The 13 codices he brought home that evening contained 52 texts written in Coptic, translated from even older Greek originals. Among them were the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, and the secret book of James, texts that had been systematically hunted, burned and condemned as heresy by early institutional Christianity for over 1700 years. The reason for their destruction was not theological confusion. It was precision. These texts described reality in a way that made external religious authority completely unnecessary, because they pointed every human being directly toward the divine source already living inside them. The Gnostics who wrote these words were not mystics lost in abstraction. They were observers of consciousness who had mapped the architecture of the invisible world with disturbing accuracy. And woven through every page of the Nag Hammadi library was a warning and a promise about a future planetary moment that reads, with breathtaking precision, like a description of exactly where humanity stands today. The architecture of the prison. To understand what the Gnostic texts say about the planetary transition, you must first understand what they say about the reality we currently inhabit. According to the Apocryphon of John, one of the most important texts recovered at Nag Hammadi, the material world was not created by the true God, the infinite, unknowable divine source, the Gnostics called the monad. The architecture of the prison. To understand what the Gnostic texts say about the planetary transition, you must first understand what they say about the reality we currently inhabit. According to the Apocryphon of John, one of the most important texts recovered at Nag Hammadi, the material world was not created by the true God, the infinite, unknowable divine source, the Gnostics called the monad. It was created by a lesser, flawed being called the demiurge, a blind architect who fashioned a physical reality that functions as a kind of cosmic distraction, pulling human consciousness away from its true origin and keeping it permanently absorbed in survival, fear, and sensory identification. The demiurge did not work alone. Surrounding him was a hierarchy of beings, the Gnostics called archons, invisible administrators of the material frequency, entities whose entire function was to maintain the integrity of the illusion and prevent human souls from remembering what they truly are. The Apocryphon of John describes them in precise detail, assigning them names, functions, and domains of influence over human psychology. They operated not through force, but through frequency, through the emotional states of fear, guilt, shame, and desire that keep human attention locked inside the prison of identification with the physical body and the thinking mind. What makes this framework extraordinary is not its mythology. It is its accuracy as a map of human psychological suffering. Every contemplative tradition that has ever produced genuine awakening has described the same fundamental mechanism. a false self constructed from conditioning, running on fear, unable to perceive the vast silent awareness that underlies it. The Gnostics simply named the architects of that false self, and they also described, with remarkable clarity, the conditions under which its power begins to dissolve. The frequencies are shifting. The Gospel of Thomas opens with a statement that has troubled scholars and illuminated mystics for decades. Jesus says, and this is preserved verbatim in the Nag Hammadi text, that whoever finds the interpretation of these words will not taste death. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. The implication is a transformation so total that the ordinary human relationship with mortality, with fear, with the sense of being a separate and fragile self, simply ceases to apply. Thomas does not frame this as a distant promise. It is presented as an immediate possibility, accessible to anyone willing to look directly at what these words are pointing toward. What the Gnostic seers understood, and what is now being confirmed through multiple converging lenses from quantum physics to consciousness, research to the observable acceleration of collective awakening worldwide, is that the planetary transition is not primarily an external event. It is a shift in the fundamental frequency at which human consciousness is capable of perceiving reality. The archonic system, the architecture of illusion described in the Apocryphon of John, depends entirely on human attention remaining locked at a specific vibrational bandwidth, the frequency of fear, separation, and unconscious identification. When the planetary frequency rises above that threshold, the entire system of control begins to lose coherence. If this knowledge is resonating with something deep inside you, it means you are already part of this transition. In the coming days, we are releasing a complete guide that goes far beyond what any single video can cover. Ancient wisdom, consciousness tools, and the full map of what is happening and why. Stay connected so you don't miss it. What the Gospel of Thomas really reveals. The Gospel of Thomas contains 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, with zero narrative, zero miracles, and zero theology. There is no resurrection story, no virgin birth, no apocalyptic drama. There is only a relentless, precise, almost surgical series of invitations to look inward and recognize something that was never absent. Sajin 22 states that when you make the two into one, the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, the above like the below, then you will enter the kingdom. This is not a description of heaven after death. It is a description of a state of consciousness available now, in which the perceived division between self and universe, between inner and outer reality, between the human and the divine, simply collapses. This collapse of division is precisely what the planetary transition is accelerating. The Gnostics understood that the archonic frequency, the consciousness of separation, is not a permanent condition of human existence. It is a passé, a developmental stage in the soul's journey from identification with the material to recognition of its true nature as an expression of the monad, the infinite divine source that underlies all apparent forms. The transition is the moment when enough human souls simultaneously reach the threshold of this recognition that the collective field of consciousness shifts irreversibly. Saying 77 of the Gospel of Thomas records Jesus saying that he is the light that is over all things, that he is the all, that the all came forth from him, and the all attained to him. Split a piece of wood, and he is there. Lift up the stone, and you will find him there. This is not theology. This is a precise description of non-dual awareness. The direct recognition that consciousness is not inside the body looking out at a separate world, but is the very fabric within which all experience arises. The awakening the archons cannot stop. The hypostasis of the archons. Another extraordinary text from the Nag Hammadi library contains a passage that reads with uncanny relevance to the present moment. It describes a time when the veil of the archonic system begins to tear not through conflict, not through apocalyptic destruction, but through the simple, unstoppable proliferation of gnosis, of direct inner knowing, spreading from one awakened soul to another, like light moving through a darkened room. The archons, the text explains, cannot prevent this. Their power exists only within the frequency of unconsciousness. The moment a soul genuinely recognizes its own divine nature, it exits the jurisdiction of the archonic system entirely and permanently. This is the planetary transition, described in the Gnostic framework, not a pole shift, not a celestial event visible to the naked eye, but a threshold crossing in collective human consciousness that renders the architecture of illusion structurally incoherent. The Apocryphon of John describes the monad as the invisible spirit from which all light originates, pure, immeasurable, perfect, and incorruptible. Every human soul carries a spark of this light, what the Gnostics called the pneuma, buried beneath layers of archonic conditioning. The transition is the moment when enough of these sparks simultaneously remember what they are, that the darkness simply cannot hold its shape any longer. We are living inside that moment right now. The acceleration of awakening visible across every culture and continent. The simultaneous collapse of old systems of control and the emergence of new paradigms of consciousness. All of it maps with precision onto what the Gnostic seers described from their desert hermitages 2,000 years ago. This video has taken you through the hidden architecture of Gnostic cosmology and its precise resonance with the planetary transition unfolding in real time. From the accidental discovery of the Nag Hammadi library in 1945 to the Apocryphon of John's map of the archonic system, from the Gospel of Thomas's radical invitation to immediate awakening to the hypostasis of the Archon's description of the moment their system. Los Esquerense. Everything points to the same conclusion. The transition is not coming. It has begun. The only question is whether you are conscious of your role within it. If something in this video awakened a recognition inside you, that recognition is not accidental. You are watching this because you are already part of what is being described. In the next few days, we are launching an e-book that brings together ancient wisdom traditions, Gnostic teachings, and practical tools for navigating the transition with clarity and purpose. This will be a complete guide for those ready to go deeper beyond the surface into the living knowledge that transforms everything. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you are the first to receive it. The map is almost ready, and you were meant to have it.